Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, the show for women who are seeking more fulfillment in life and simply not getting it from their current situation. We focus specifically on careers, but hey, we spend a lot of time in our careers, so making changes here will definitely create an impact in your overall happiness. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and my mission is to empower women to succeed. I believe that in order to powerfully own your career, you must decide and claim that you want to sit in the driver's seat. You must know that you deserve better and be willing to not only do the requisite work, but be willing to go out on a limb to ensure your success. Each episode focuses on profiling a leader who is clearly demonstrating ownership of their career. Join me and my guests as we explore career journeys and bring you actionable strategies to use to get into the driver's seat for your career. Because ultimately, your career is your responsibility. Let's get into the show. In this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, we are joined by Eddie Turner, leadership expert. Eddie is an international best-selling author, an executive and leadership coach, a keynote speaker, and a podcast host. We're pleased to have him on the show. He sits down with Simone and talks about why we need to move away from our comfort levels to stop being complacent and to, in fact, get into the driver's seat for our careers. Listen to this episode where Eddie tells us what was the impetus for him to take the driver's seat position and how pivotal education was to his career. Let's get right into the show. Eddie Turner, welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm so pleased to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, Simone. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm a big fan. We've never met in person, but I feel like I know you from all the good work that you're doing in terms of coaching. You're a podcaster yourself, facilitation, etc. Just really exciting work that you're doing. So immediately, my first question to you is, how did you know that you were in the driver's seat for your career?
I laugh, Simone, because sometimes I wonder, am I really in the driver's seat?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I will say I have always tried to be intentional about goal setting. But I didn't realize until late in my career as an IT professional that I was not being intentional about owning my career.
Mm.
Like so many people, as I work with clients today as an executive coach, I look back at that time in my life and realize I was leaving my career in the hands of other people, my managers. I was leaving it in the hands of the leadership team. And when that wasn't working, I was leaving it in the hands of the job board, hoping that internally, one day a job would surface that I qualified for, and I kept passing up jobs thinking that I didn't qualify for them. And then the couple that I would apply for, being told that I didn't have the right qualifications, being told that I didn't have enough experience, being told for whatever the reason was, I didn't qualify. And it was only at a certain point that I realized I've got to take control. One of the big things I kept being told is I didn't have a degree. And as an IT professional, initially, we didn't need degrees. We laughed at the folks with degrees because we had no debt, but we were making more money. Because in the heydays of IT, all you needed were certifications.
Yes. I don't know if you know this, Eddie. I have an IT background. Most of my career is in IT, so I'm relating very well to what you're saying. I'll just drop Lotus Notes out there. I still have that Lotus Notes certification. But anyway, go on with the story, Eddie.
Oh, you're going to start me talking some talk there, because Lotus Notes, that was it. That was the main software. Lotus Notes is what made computers popular. When accountants realized they could do their work better, quicker, faster with Lotus Notes, that gave birth to later on, all the other applications which we use computers for today. But it was because of Lotus Notes on that original IBM 86 that made it happen. But we'll jump into that later. So yeah, you need the certifications. And finally I realized, okay, I keep being told I don't have a degree. I'm going to go get a degree. Then later on, once I had the degree, well, you got the wrong degree. I remember my manager saying, you're an IT professional. Why are you getting this degree in leadership and organization behavior? And I said to her, I have always believed that even though I'm in IT, leadership matters. And there's certain things I was doing that I didn't have a language for, but this gave me that language. So that was me, the first step to be taking ownership of my career and driving it in a different direction and no longer waiting on other people to realize my value or decide that I qualified. I was going to qualify myself and be in charge.
I love that. I love that. I can relate to that on so many levels because I always, when I speak, I tell people that I was in the passenger seat for many, many years. And I too was waiting for that ideal job to come along. And there's a certain point where you decide enough is enough and that you're going to take control of your career. So it sounds like education was a lever for you to make that decision.
Yes, as the old saying goes, it's all based on education, right? Education is what opens the doors. And so even with that, being intentional about where I went, I was going to initially I decided that I was going to go to the quickest place to get the degree finished. And then good mentors said to me, when I went to ask for advice, they said, no, you're only going to go to, I was living in Chicago. They said Northwestern or the University of Chicago. I was working for GE. I'm in the finance division, and all the finance people only respected certain degrees, they said. And so that influenced me to go to Northwestern. From there, I got the opportunity to study under some great professors, some of which to this day I'm still friends with years later. And I met the mentor who came as a guest speaker that would change my life. And that's because that mentor would open the access to power by pulling me into his organization as a consultant and teaching me the business of learning and talent development, which put me on the path that I'm on today.
Wonderful. Well, tell us about that. Let's go to the space of mentoring and sponsorship, because it sounds like your mentor was also a sponsor for you. So tell our listeners about that relationship a bit and about how mentoring has truly helped you to stay in the driver's seat and grow you in your career.
Mentors are pivotal. And mentors and sponsors will not always be the same. Mm-hmm. In this case, it was. I got fortunate. But in some cases, as in my earlier scenarios where I was seeking advice on which school to select, these were just mentors giving me advice, helping me guide my career. As I was trying to shift gears, I realized I didn't need any IT mentors. I needed business mentors, people who understood the language of business. And so I sought those folks out. And that decision to go to Northwestern has paid huge dividends. I am so happy I chose Northwestern as opposed to the other decisions I was looking at. That gave me access to the mentor I had that wouldn't have been at the other school. And it gave me a network that I have that has served me as I've gone around the country and gone around the world. I see the power of that network. And that's what he said to me. He said, Eddie, you are going to go to Northwestern, not for the education. Yeah, that'll be great. He said, but you're going and you're paying for access to the network. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I understand now. And so mentor there, the mentorship that I ended up with Bob is in this business relationship. He also could open the door and be my sponsor. And as I said, I've worked for him as a consultant. So he was sponsoring me and paying for me to be there. But there have been other mentors who have just given that advice and guided me to the next mentor. And I believe firmly that each mentor can take you to a certain point, and you have to select other mentors. Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there. And I told Marshall, I said, hey, Marshall, I believe that who got you here won't get you there. I said, that should be the title of your next book, Marshall, because when it comes to mentorship, and I find myself talking about that a lot more these days, I really believe it's a series. It's a continuum that one must build and not just select one or two people and say, these are my people for life. We love them and we'll still have them in our lives. But as you grow, those folks no longer will serve you the same way. You need to get people at that next level to continue to help pull you up and to continue to help you develop.
I love that. I love that, Eddie, on so many levels. So talk to us about, from your experience being in the corporate space, speaking, going around the country, doing your own consulting, and all this education that you have had. What is the secret sauce? What is the formula for successfully owning your career? What are the necessary ingredients?
I say that people should never get complacent.
Mm.
Oftentimes in our career, we get complacent and we get comfortable. And when we get comfortable, we don't want to change. And so we end up in a situation that I described earlier where other people are making decisions for us. In fact, when talking about mentorship, one of the reasons I say that's important, but you also want the sponsorship, that person who's the decision maker, that person who has not just the access to power, but actually can pull the levers, is because 90% of decisions that are made about us when we're not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So you need that person who's in the room talking about you and speaking for you in some cases. You know, I remember one mentor, he actually said to me, he said, listen, this is what was going on in the room. He said they were questioning why I was using you and not this group of people who really should be doing it.
Mm.
And I had to explain, since they aren't doing it, I got you to do it, and you're doing it far better than they would. Now, he said what I would have said, but I wasn't in the room.
Right. I love that. I love getting access.
So you need that. So if we are not careful, we get comfortable, we get complacent, we start to let these other people make decisions for us. Oh, well, he isn't the right person. He doesn't have this training. He doesn't have this background. All these different he doesn't have or she doesn't have. Whereas that person in the room will say, well, listen, maybe she doesn't have this or he doesn't have that, but here's what they do have. They are capable of. Or there's that person that says, why not take a chance on them? Sometimes the best occurrences in one's career is because someone took a chance on them. In fact, I quote Dr. Willie Jolly oftentimes because he says, sometimes you have to believe in someone else long enough until they believe in themselves. And we have all had a teacher in grade school or a coach, somebody who believed in us and kept pushing us and believing in us and helping us when we couldn't see it. And finally, we get to that point that we can. And so in our careers, I believe that is so important. Don't get comfortable. Don't get complacent. Stay hungry. Have self-awareness and keep plotting your career. And, quite frankly, the old days, the saying was, don't be a job hopper. Well, that doesn't apply anymore. If you've been in a company 5 years, 7 years, you should probably start to evaluate where you're going. Now, there's some organizations where that works, but are you still doing the same job you've been doing at that company? Because the way things work today, technology is the great disintermediator. Is technology going to disintermediate my role? Is the competition because of an acquisition going to disintermediate my role? Now, there are certain sectors that doesn't apply. For example, energy services. When I came here to energy services, I saw something I haven't seen in most of the corporate jobs I've been around. I see people still working 30 and 40 years in the same organization. You don't see that most of the time in finance world. You don't see that in some of the other sectors. Medical, another area, right? So when I'm saying wouldn't apply there, those folks are going to stay there for a long, long time. But in most careers, we may run the risk of getting pigeonholed, getting stuck. And then when the inevitable layoffs, when the inevitable acquisition comes, and there's now the duplication of resources, we are not in a position to go someplace else easily and get the same salary because we haven't kept our skills current. We haven't developed a broader portfolio of knowledge, and it makes it more challenging for us.
I'm relating to so much of what you're saying, Eddie, because I'm going back to my corporate days and just thinking about being complacent. And you're so right about, the word or term that I've heard is golden handcuffs, where you get really comfortable with the benefits, the pay, the access that you have. You don't need to think, you just show up and do your job. And so you get comfortable and complacent, like you're talking about. So I'm really resonating with that. And I know that our listeners will resonate with that as well. Can you talk to us about resources that you have found to be helpful to accelerating in your career?
I think shows like this, where you can learn how to take control of the power of owning your career. I think that, so podcasts, I think that obviously there's a plethora of websites. There are university programs that I think that people, and that's one that people I think underutilize. When you graduate, you're still an alumnus of the organization. And many of their career services departments are more than willing to still help. It's not just a recent college grad. So sometimes folks are afraid to tap into that career services organization. Sometimes it's the alumni association, right? People want to hire people that they like or that they have an affiliation with. And so leveraging those types of organizational portals. And interestingly, even internally in an organization, while you're still at year 1, year 2, how do you get to year 5, year 7, year 10, if possible? Well, oftentimes there are career development opportunities internally that individuals may not take advantage of. I had an organization where I was the only coach that they assigned to coach the entire organization. One of the things I asked for were just these options that I'm describing. What opportunities for development do they have? Give me access, please, to the whole portal. They did. And I will tell you that of all the people I coached, not one knew about those options. So how is it that I, the external coach, is coming in telling people about something that the internal managers, number one, should be telling their people to take advantage of? The HR team, right? They were even surprised when I asked about that. The company has paid all this money. They have these resources, but no one, absolutely no one is taking advantage of them. So be it the free programs for learning conflict resolution, learning communication skills, these free programs that are sitting there, they're not taking advantage of. Oftentimes they have subscription to the Harvard Business Review. They have subscriptions to the best resources in terms of research. It's all there. People aren't taking advantage of it. LinkedIn Learning, that's another big one. Some organizations are buying access to that where people can take advantage of all those classes. And those classes you not only take, but you get that badge to put on your profile. Completed this training, completed that training, showing that you continue to grow and develop yourself at little or no cost. So there are certainly a lot of resources that will cost money, but there's just a ton of things that are available that folks could do that don't cost much at all.
I think you're right. What I've seen in the COVID time is just so much free material. And I love the word that you used in the beginning, which is being intentional about your career. So taking advantage of the training opportunities you've spoken about. But you're right. There's so much opportunity available that's free or low cost that people can take advantage of as well. Can you talk to us about risk and how you've used risk in your career to bet on yourself?
Sometimes we like to play it safe.
Mm.
We want to know we have a check coming. We want to know we have that insurance package. We want to be able to provide for our families. But risk and being willing to bet on ourselves, as you said, is so important. It goes back to that quote I sent by Dr. Jolly. Sometimes other people won't believe in us. So it's the reverse of what he says, right? In that case, do we believe in ourselves enough? And, that's been the case in my career several times where, people, quite frankly, may have told me I was doing the wrong thing. And I just had to have enough faith and confidence in myself. And that faith and confidence is not misplaced. It's a difference between a lack of self-awareness and a self-awareness where you know your abilities even when others can't see it. For example, there was an opportunity at an organization early in my IT career to step in and help save the day. This is going way back. This is the launch of Windows 95. This is the time in computer world where executives didn't use computers. It was still new. Everybody had their own secretary, right? And we call them secretaries, right? Today, you call them administrative assistants, and everybody doesn't have their own. It's like one for a team. But in those days, everybody had their own secretary. They did the typing for them. And we were at this organization, Deloitte, they wanted to be the first and to have Windows 95. And the goal was to train every single partner how to use the computer. They brought brand new computers, Windows 95, and they had hired an organization to come in and train them how to use this technology. This was revolutionary then. Today, anybody listening to this is going, well, what's the big deal with that? It was a big deal then. Nobody did it. And so whatever happens the night before we go live, or it was 2 days before we went live, it was some short period, they bailed. And we're sitting in a meeting with my manager, and the manager is going, she's explaining the situation to us. You know, I'm just the guy at the help desk. And she says, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, I'll do it. And she looked at me and she's like, what do you mean? I said, I'll do it. I will teach them how to use the computer. I will run the program. She said, why should we take a chance on you doing it? Do you know what you're doing? Yeah. So she says, well, meet me in my office in an hour. And so she had me do a mock training session for her. They didn't know that I had a background in teaching. And this was my first job. You know, I was 20 years old. So they didn't know I had a background in teaching. They knew I didn't have a college degree. They just knew I was this technical guy. But I'd been teaching since I was 12 years old. They didn't know that. And so I did it. That actually was a foray to me from then on doing training as a professional job in addition to whatever I was doing in IT. So that was me believing in myself when other people didn't know my skills. That confidence would serve me later on in so many other situations throughout my career in IT, and later on when I switched into leadership development. I remember when I decided I wanted to be a coach. People said, you know, first I actually laughed when people said I should become a coach. They said, you're so good with people and executives, you should be a coach. So when I decided that based on what people who believed me were telling me, when I would then try to tell the management team, they didn't feel like I should be a coach. And I bet the farm on what I could do. And I became a coach. And then, of course, it's tough to get people to take you serious because your background doesn't say anything about coaching. Your background says everything about IT. Yes, and so all the HR people are like, well, why should we hire you? You don't have the background. So it took a long time to get there, right? So we fundamentally must believe in ourselves before others believe in us, and that involves risk. I've quit jobs at times because I didn't feel like it was no longer serving me, and there's been a couple of times I didn't really know what was coming next. I absolutely had no idea, but what I did have confidence in is myself, but also, you know, I believe in God. Some believe in a higher power. Whatever you believe in, I believe it has to be a combination of both, because I don't personally believe I can do anything on my own. I believe it's through all things come through the power He gives me, and what what little small ability I have, what He does to maximize that and make it possible.
Wonderful. I love that. What a wonderful way to wrap up our interview. So many good nuggets. I know that I have enjoyed the interview, and I know our listeners will as well. Any parting words before we wrap up?
No, just continue listening to Simone's great podcast and the power of owning your career. Don't minimize that.
Absolutely. Well, please tell our listeners before we go how they can stay connected with you, Eddie.
You can visit me at AskEddieTurner.com. I spell Eddie, Eddie. Some people spell it differently, so I have to say that. So AskEddieTurner.com. There you can connect to me on social media. You can follow me. If you tell me that you heard me on Simone Morris's The Power of Owning Your Career podcast, I will send you a PDF version of my international best-selling book, 140 Simple Messages to Guide Emerging Leaders.
Wonderful. What a treat for our listeners. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It is my hope that you enjoyed today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode on the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website by clicking the podcast menu. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend or two about it.